The rain fell like liquid glass over the city, turning the world into a blur of lights and trembling reflections. Clara Reyes tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her knuckles, white as thunder, growled above. The wipers swayed furiously, but they couldn't keep up with the downpour. Each flash of lightning illuminated rows of mansions behind wrought-iron gates, their windows glowing faintly in the storm like watchful eyes. The GPS on her phone blinked, froze, and died with a low beep. Great. Lost in the richest part of town with a soaked portfolio and a phone gasping its last breath. She pulled over under a cluster of dripping trees, breathing hard. Her best friend Isabel's words echoed in her mind. Just drop the samples tonight, Clara. It's an easy delivery. You'll impress the firm. Easy, she thought bitterly. Nothing about this night was easy. She had been running on caffeine and faith for days, juggling freelance work and design proposals to pay rent on the tiny apartment she shared with Isabel. And now she was alone, soaked and freezing, trying to find an address that might as well have vanished from the map. Through the sheets of rain, she caught sight of a driveway lined with lanterns. A number glimmered faintly on a stone pillar, 2249 or maybe 2294. The digits blurred behind the curtain of water, but she didn't care anymore. Shelter was all she wanted. The gate was half open, an invitation she didn't question. The tires crunched over gravel as she drove through, past manicured gardens shining under the storm. The mansion that appeared at the end of the path looked unreal, like a dream of glass and steel. Warm light spilled from its windows, and for a moment Clara imagined what it would feel like to belong somewhere like that, to walk into a home that didn't creak with loneliness. She parked near the entrance, grabbed the portfolio wrapped in plastic and ran. Rain slapped her face, her hair stuck to her skin, and by the time she reached the enormous oak doors she was trembling. She knocked once, twice, waited. No sound came from inside. She hesitated, then turned the handle. The door opened with a soft click. A breath of warm air escaped, expensive cologne, wood, and the faint trace of whiskey. Hello. Her voice was small against the vast silence. The hall was dim, lit by golden sconces that reflected on marble floors. Modern paintings lined the walls, abstract storms of black and silver. She stepped in, leaving a trail of wet footprints. Somewhere deeper in the house, music played, soft and haunting. Footsteps echoed. She froze. A man appeared at the end of the hallway, his figure tall, precise, and intimidatingly graceful even in half-darkness. The light caught on the sharp lines of his face, the loosened tie, the dark hair falling over his forehead. His eyes were grey, cold steel at first glance, but something in them flickered. A storm beneath calm waters. "You're late," he said quietly, voice husky from whiskey and sleeplessness. Clara's heart tripped. I think he didn't let her finish. He stepped closer, studying her with unnerving intensity. "The agency said you were different." They were right. Agency. The word struck her, but her brain couldn't process it fast enough. She should have corrected him, should have explained, but the way he looked at her made language dissolve. He stopped inches away, the heat of his body cutting through the cold that clung to her skin. His gaze traveled from her soaked hair to the trembling hands clutching the portfolio. "You're drenched." His voice dropped to a murmur, more to himself than to her. Then almost tenderly, "Put that down." She obeyed before thinking, setting the portfolio on a side table. He reached out, brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek, and his touch sent an electric pulse through her. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. "I'm not," she lied, her voice barely a breath. He smiled faintly, a sad curve of lips that revealed more pain than charm. Then, as if caught in a force greater than both of them, he leaned forward and kissed her. The world shattered into silence. His lips were warm and desperate, tasting faintly of whiskey and rain. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision, a confession neither understood. Clara's mind screamed to pull away, to explain, to stop this mistake before it became irreversible, but her body betrayed her. For one dizzying moment, she melted into the kiss, letting it burn away the loneliness that had been eating her alive for months. Then she pulled back, breathless, eyes wide. The shock on his face mirrored hers. Neither spoke. "I have to go," she stammered, voice breaking. Before he could move, she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the marble hall, the storm swallowing her as she ran back into the night. When the door slammed behind her, Damien Voss stood frozen in the silence she left behind, the taste of her still on his lips. He had no name, no explanation, only the echo of a kiss that felt too real to be a mistake. And outside, beneath the endless rain, Clara whispered to herself, trembling, "What have I done?" Neither of them knew it yet, but that single, stolen kiss had already changed everything. The night refused to end inside Damien Voss's mind. He sat in the shadows of his study, the fire dying in the hearth, the taste of that kiss still haunting his mouth like a ghost that refused to fade. The storm outside had quieted, but the storm inside him raged stronger. He had kissed a stranger. No, not just kissed. He had felt something rip through the hollow cage he had called his heart for years. Something raw, dangerous, alive. Damien leaned back in his chair, staring at the empty glass in his hand. The escort named Nadia never arrived, according to the agency. But someone had walked into his house, soaked to the bone, trembling, eyes wide like a frightened animal. And she had let him kiss her. She hadn't slapped him, hadn't screamed. She had looked at him like he was something worth touching again. That was what destroyed him most. He had spent years trying not to feel, not to want, not to believe anyone could look at him without judgment. Yet this woman, whoever she was, had undone all of that in seconds. The doorbell rang the next morning at 7. Damien's assistant, Thomas, stepped in holding a folder and a nervous expression. "Sir, the security cameras from last night glitched during the storm. Only fragments recorded." Damien's heart skipped. "Show me." Thomas placed a tablet on the desk and pressed play. The footage flickered with static. Through the blur of rain, Damien caught a silhouette. A woman running across the courtyard. The image froze for a second, her face illuminated by a flash of lightning. The clarity was brief, but enough to make him feel as if someone had reached into his chest and squeezed her eyes. Wide, uncertain, unforgettable. He spent the entire day replaying that single frame, enlarging it, tracing the lines of her face with his eyes. "Find her," he ordered finally. Thomas hesitated. "Sir, with the storm, there's no plate number visible." "We have no name." Damien's voice dropped, quiet but sharp as a blade. "Then find something. Anything." Meanwhile, across town, Clara stood under the shower until the water turned cold, hoping it could wash away the memory of last night. It didn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt that kiss again. It wasn't just desire that had shaken her. It was the way he had looked at her before his lips touched hers, like he was seeing someone he had been searching for all his life. She wrapped herself in a towel and stared at her reflection in the mirror. What had she done? How do you explain to the world that you kissed a man you didn't know because, for a heartbeat, it felt like the world stopped turning? Her phone buzzed. Isabel's message flashed on the screen. "Client confirmed. You're presenting tomorrow morning. Big contract. Don't be late." Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. Work. She needed to bury herself in it, hide behind it, anything to forget those grey eyes. The next day arrived with sunlight slicing through her blinds. Clara wore her best blazer, hair tied neatly, portfolio in hand. She arrived at Voss Industries headquarters without realizing it was the same name etched on the mansion gate. The building rose like a tower of glass, reflecting the clouds above. She entered the boardroom, nerves buzzing under her skin, trying to focus on her designs. The moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. Conversations quieted. A presence entered the room from behind her, commanding without words. She didn't have to turn around to know it was him. The same quiet gravity, the same scent of cedar and whiskey. Slowly, she turned. Damien Voss stood at the doorway, wearing a tailored suit that fit him like sin, his grey eyes locking onto her with shock and something darker, recognition. Silence stretched between them like a live wire. Every heartbeat felt like thunder. "You," he said, his voice a low echo that rippled through the room. Clara's throat tightened. The architects and executives exchanged confused glances, but no one dared interrupt. Damien took a step closer, each stride precise, unhurried, predatory. "I didn't imagine you," he continued, stopping a breath away from her. "You're real." Clara's fingers trembled around her folder. "Mr. Voss, I think there's a misunderstanding." His jaw clenched. "I never forget a face I've kissed." The room froze. One of the assistants coughed nervously. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Her secret, her mistake, the one night she had sworn to bury, had just come crashing into daylight. "Everyone out," Damien ordered quietly. No one questioned him. The staff scrambled, and within seconds they were alone. The door clicked shut behind the last person. The silence that followed was suffocating. He moved closer, his eyes searching hers. "Who are you?" he asked softly. "And why did you walk into my house that night?" Clara wanted to speak, to tell him everything, but fear glued her words inside her throat. He reached out, his fingertips brushing the sleeve of her blazer, and she flinched. "You can lie," he murmured, his voice softer now. "But your eyes won't." Clara felt her defenses crumble. That night she had been invisible to the world, but to him she had been seen. And now that same gaze, intense and merciless, held her trapped once again. She turned away, forcing herself to breathe. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "That's all." Damien's reply came like thunder after lightning. "Then why do I feel like it wasn't?" Outside, the sunlight faded behind dark clouds again, as if the storm had been waiting for them to meet once more. And deep down, both knew it was only the beginning. The elevator doors closed, and Clara leaned against the mirrored wall, trying to breathe. Her heart was racing so fast she could feel it in her throat. The scent of his cologne still clung to her clothes, the echo of his voice still in her ears. "You're real." The words replayed like a song she couldn't turn off. She had sworn to forget that night, to bury it like a mistake she'd never repeat. But fate had dragged her right back into his world and sealed the door behind her. By the time she reached the lobby, her hands were trembling. She clutched the portfolio against her chest as if it could protect her from the chaos inside her. Outside the building, the city pulsed with life, taxis honking, rain beginning to fall again, a grey drizzle that turned the glass towers into ghosts. She walked without direction, her mind spinning. If he exposed her, she'd lose everything. Her job, her reputation, her career. But worse, if he came closer again, she knew she might lose herself. Across the city, Damien sat in his penthouse office, staring at the rain streaking down the window. Her face wouldn't leave his mind. The shock, the fear, the way her eyes widened when he said her name, though he didn't even know it. There was something about her that refused to fit into logic. He had kissed her once, and it had felt like recognition. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted to understand why a stranger had made him feel alive for the first time in years. He called his assistant. "Find out everything about the new designer working under the Voss Interiors division. The one who presented today." Thomas hesitated. "Is there a problem, sir?" Damien's voice sharpened. "No problem. Just curiosity." That evening, Clara returned to her small apartment. Isabel was there, dancing around the living room with a glass of wine. "You're back late." "How was the meeting?" Clara forced a smile. "Fine, just a lot of pressure." She didn't mention his name. She couldn't. But when she closed her bedroom door and leaned against it, her composure shattered. She remembered the way he had looked at her in that boardroom, the intensity in his eyes, the command in his voice. She buried her face in her hands. She knew this wasn't over. 2 days passed in silence. Then on the third morning her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop. Voss Industries. A woman's voice said politely, "Mr. Voss requested your presence at the mansion this evening to discuss the project personally." Clara's pulse exploded. The mansion. The place where it all began. Every instinct screamed no, but her professional self said she couldn't refuse a client of that magnitude. "Tell him I'll be there," she heard herself say before hanging up. That night she stood in front of the Voss estate once again. The rain had returned, gentler this time, like a memory repeating itself. The gates opened automatically as if recognizing her. She walked up the long driveway, heart hammering. The front door opened before she could knock. Damien was standing there, tall, composed, the firelight behind him turning his silhouette into something almost mythical. "Come in." he said softly. His tone wasn't demanding this time. It was something else, measured, patient, dangerous. She stepped inside, every nerve on edge. The same scent filled the air, sandalwood, whiskey, memory. He guided her into the same living room where the fire crackled quietly. The storm outside painted moving shadows on the walls. "Sit," he said. She obeyed, too aware of his presence as he poured 2 glasses of wine. "I thought about that night," he began. "Every day since you left." Clara tried to look away, but his voice pinned her. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "It was a mistake." He walked closer, placing the glass in her hand. "Was it?" His question wasn't cruel. It was sincere, almost pleading. "I don't believe in coincidences, Clara. You walked into my house, and from that moment I couldn't think of anything else." "That's not a mistake. That's something else." Her name on his lips made her shiver. "How do you know my name?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "I make it my business to know the people who leave me restless," he said simply. "I wanted to know who you were, now I do. But it doesn't change what I felt that night." Clara stood abruptly, the chair scraping the marble. "You had no right to look into my life." He took a step closer, his calm unbroken. "I had no choice. You vanished. I needed to know if you were real." Their eyes locked. The fire popped behind them, sending sparks into the air. "You kissed a stranger," she said. "You shouldn't want me." Damien's voice softened, almost breaking. "Maybe I kissed the only person who wasn't pretending." Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with things unsaid, with confessions hiding in the spaces between their breaths. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers, and this time she didn't pull away. "You can leave if you want," he murmured. "But if you stay, don't lie to me again." The rain outside thickened, thunder rolled in the distance, and Clara felt her heart racing toward something she couldn't stop. She wanted to run, yet her body refused to move. She had come back to end the mistake, but standing there inches from him, she realized it was no longer a mistake. It was fate demanding to be heard, and as lightning flashed across the windows, she whispered the truth neither of them was ready for. "I haven't stopped thinking about you either." The firelight painted moving shadows across the walls, while the storm outside raged louder than before. Clara stood frozen in the center of the room, her heart hammering so fast she thought it might burst. Damien's eyes never left her face. He moved closer, slow and deliberate, until his voice was a whisper brushing her skin. "Then don't run this time." Every cell in her body screamed to move, to break the spell that had wrapped around them since that first night. But when he reached out and his fingers brushed the inside of her wrist, she couldn't breathe. His touch was light, yet it burned through her like fire. She turned her face away, desperate to control her shaking voice. "This isn't right. I'm here as a professional. I shouldn't even be standing in this house." He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing curve of his lips. "You're right. But tell me you don't feel it. Tell me that night didn't change you too." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to lie, to end it, but her silence spoke louder than words. Damien exhaled sharply and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not the man you think I am." She met his gaze, trembling. "Then who are you?" He hesitated, and for the first time she saw something raw in his eyes, an exhaustion that no amount of wealth could hide. A man who lost everything once because he trusted the wrong person. A man who's been waiting for something real, even if it came through the wrong door. The thunder outside cracked like a warning. Clara's pulse jumped. She grabbed her coat, desperate to escape before she drowned in the weight of his words. "I have to go." Damien didn't stop her, but his voice followed her as she reached the door. "You can run, Clara, but the truth doesn't go away when you close your eyes." Rain slapped against her skin as she stepped outside, the cold biting into her like guilt. She drove home in silence, but his words echoed inside her head, refusing to fade. "The truth doesn't go away when you close your eyes." 3 nights passed. She didn't answer his calls. Not the messages from the company asking her to return, not the one number she secretly saved but couldn't bear to see light up. She threw herself into work, sketching designs until dawn, as if lines and colors could erase a memory. But when she finally closed her eyes, she saw him. Every time. The rain, the kiss, the voice that made her feel alive and terrified all at once. By the fourth night, sleep wouldn't come. She walked out to the small balcony of her apartment, the city lights flickering like restless stars. Somewhere out there, she knew he was awake too. She felt it, the strange pull that refused to break. Across the city, Damien stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the wind lashing his shirt open. His phone was still on the table, beside an untouched glass of scotch. Every time he tried to forget her, his mind betrayed him. The way she trembled, the honesty in her eyes when she said she hadn't stopped thinking about him. He knew he had scared her, but something deeper told him she hadn't run away from fear. She had run from herself. He turned back inside, the decision already made. He would find her, not as Damien Voss the billionaire, but as the man she had seen that night, the man stripped of everything except truth. The next morning, Clara arrived early at the design studio, only to freeze when she saw a familiar figure standing by the window. Damien, in her office, wearing a charcoal suit that somehow made him look even more dangerous. "Your receptionist let me in," he said quietly. "I needed to see you," her co-workers whispered in the background, trying not to stare. Clara forced her voice to stay steady. "This isn't appropriate." "I know," he said, "but neither is pretending." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I can't get you out of my head, and I don't think you can either. So either we find out what this is, or we spend the rest of our lives lying about it." Her knees felt weak. "Damien, please, not here." He looked around the glass office, his jaw tightening. "Fine, then tonight. One last conversation, no games. I'll be at the gallery on 5th Street at 9. If you don't come, I'll never bother you again." He walked out before she could answer, leaving her breathless in the echo of his promise. That night the city pulsed with tension. Clara stood outside the gallery under the drizzle, clutching her umbrella so tightly it hurt. Inside, the lights glowed soft and golden, the quiet hum of piano music drifting through the door. And there he was, waiting, a single glass of wine in his hand. When she entered, he smiled, not with arrogance but relief. "You came. I shouldn't have," she said softly. "But you did," he whispered, stepping closer. "And that's all I needed to know." She felt the air tighten between them, charged with everything they'd left unsaid. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're the only mistake that ever made sense." The words hit her like lightning, and before she could respond, thunder rolled outside, drowning the rest of the world in sound. And for the second time in their lives, fate sealed the door behind them, whispering that some storms never really end, they just find new places to begin. The sound of thunder rolled across the city again, as if the sky itself remembered the night they met. Inside the dimly lit gallery, Clara stood frozen, her umbrella still dripping onto the marble floor. Damien was only a few feet away, his grey eyes locked on hers with the same intensity that had haunted her dreams. The paintings around them shimmered under soft lights, storms, oceans, chaos captured in colour, and she wondered if he had chosen this place on purpose. It felt too much like them, two tempests circling the same silence. He moved first, closing the distance between them. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said softly. "But if you are, tell me why." Clara forced a shaky breath. "Because every time you look at me, I forget who I am." The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Damien's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Maybe that's what you need, to stop remembering the woman who's been hiding." Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears. "You think I'm hiding? You don't know me." His gaze burned deeper. "Then let me." The air between them grew thick. Clara wanted to step back, to end whatever this was before it destroyed her. But his voice held her still. "That night," he continued, "when I kissed you, I wasn't drunk enough to forget how it felt. I knew it was wrong, but it was the first time in years I didn't feel empty." She shook her head, desperate to escape the pull in his voice. "You shouldn't say things like that. Why?" he asked, moving closer, his tone darkening. "Because they're true?" Her back touched the edge of a sculpture pedestal, cold marble, pressing into her spine. He stopped a breath away, his scent of cedar and rain surrounding her. "Tell me, Clara," he whispered, "why did you stay that night? You could have run the moment you saw me." Clara looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Because when you looked at me, it felt like you saw everything I was trying to forget." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he reached up, brushing her wet hair behind her ear. The touch was tender, almost reverent. "You make me want to believe again," he murmured. "And that terrifies me." Before she could answer, the door burst open. A flash of a camera, voices, reporters. Clara flinched as lights exploded around them. "Mr. Voss, is this your new girlfriend?" One shouted. "How long has this been going on?" Damien stepped instinctively in front of her, shielding her from the flashes. His voice turned sharp. "Get out!" The guards rushed in to clear the room, but the damage was done. Clara's heart dropped as the realization hit. Someone had tipped them off. She turned on him, breath uneven. "You set this up?" He looked shocked. "Of course not. Then how did they know we'd be here?" she demanded. The gallery lights flickered, thunder echoing again outside. Damien's expression hardened. "Someone wanted this," he said, his tone darkening to steel. "Someone who knows where I am and who you are." Clara's pulse raced. "Who would do that?" He hesitated only a second before saying the name she didn't know yet. "My mother." The words hit like ice. "Your mother?" "She doesn't trust anyone," he said quietly. "Especially anyone close to me. She thinks everyone has a reason to use me." Clara stared at him, disbelief mixing with fear. "And what does she think I want?" His answer came without hesitation. "Everything." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. A single message glowed. "Stay away from her, or she'll regret ever walking through your door." He shoved the phone into his pocket and grabbed her hand. "We're leaving." "Where?" she asked, startled by the sudden urgency. "Somewhere she can't find you." The rain was a wall of sound as they ran outside. He opened the car door and guided her in, his jaw tight, his mind already spinning with calculations. The city lights streaked past the windshield as they drove, silent except for the storm pounding against the glass. Finally, she spoke. "Damien, what's going on?" He didn't look at her. "You don't understand who you've gotten involved with. My mother controls everything. She's the reason my life is built on lies and silence. And now she knows about you." Clara turned toward him, her fear replaced by something colder, defiance. "I'm not afraid of her." He finally looked at her, his expression torn between admiration and worry. "You should be. She destroys everything I care about." Lightning flashed across his face, revealing a truth he had never said out loud. "She's the reason I don't believe in love." Clara's voice softened. "Then let me prove her wrong." For a moment, time stopped. The rain outside slowed. The world narrowed to the space between them. Damien's hands tightened on the wheel. "Careful what you offer, Clara. Once you enter my world, there's no way back." She met his gaze with a steadiness that surprised even her. "I already entered it the night I knocked on the wrong door." His eyes darkened with something between warning and desire. The car turned down a private road leading into the hills, where the lights of the city faded behind them. "Then hold on," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Because everything is about to change." Neither of them saw the black car, following a few lengths behind, its headlights off, its driver speaking softly into a phone. "She's with him," the voice said. Knew it tonight, and far above the storm, somewhere inside the Voss mansion, Victoria Voss smiled in the dark. The tires screeched against the wet pavement as Damien's car turned sharply into a narrow road that disappeared into the forest outside the city. Rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 small fists, blurring the world into streaks of light and shadow. Clara clutched the edge of her seat, her pulse racing with a mix of fear and disbelief. They had been driving for nearly an hour, and he still hadn't told her where they were going. "Damien, please talk to me," she said, her voice trembling. "You're scaring me." His jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. "I need to keep you safe, Clara, and right now that means taking you somewhere no one can reach us." "From your mother?" she asked in disbelief. "You can't just run away from her. You don't know what she's capable of," he replied, his tone sharp, almost desperate. "When she feels threatened, she doesn't fight fair. She destroys. And she's already decided you're a threat." Clara shook her head. "That's insane." "I didn't do anything to her." Damien's grip on the wheel tightened. "You walked into my life, and that's enough for her." She doesn't tolerate anything she can't control. The car slowed as they reached a long, gated driveway hidden between trees. Damien pressed a code into a keypad, and the gate opened with a metallic groan. Beyond it stood a secluded glass cabin overlooking a dark lake. It was beautiful, but it looked more like a trap than a refuge. He parked the car, stepped out, and came around to open her door. "We'll stay here tonight," he said quietly. "No one knows this place exists." The rain soaked through her coat as she followed him inside. The cabin was minimalist, all glass and steel, filled with the faint smell of cedar and rain. Damien turned on the fireplace, the sudden warmth throwing golden light across his face. Clara stood by the window, watching the lightning flash across the lake. "You can't just hide me," she whispered. "This isn't normal." He turned to her, his voice low and steady. "Nothing about my life is normal, Clara, but I promise you one thing. You're safe here." "Safe," she repeated, her voice breaking. "You call this safe? You've dragged me into your war with your mother, and now you think locking me in a cabin will fix it." Damien's eyes softened, the firelight catching the storm inside them. "I didn't bring you here to lock you away. I brought you here because if anything happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beneath the strength, the loneliness behind the arrogance. For the first time, she realized how much he was fighting, against his past, against his blood, against himself. Before she could respond, a thunderous crack split the air. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. Damien's instincts snapped into focus.
"Stay here," he ordered, reaching for a flashlight. "Damien, what was that?"
Clara whispered. He moved toward the window, sweeping the light across the rain-soaked forest. For a moment, nothing. Then movement. A shadow between the trees. A figure, watching. He cursed under his breath, grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. "Someone's out there." Clara's pulse spiked. "Who?" "Someone who doesn't belong." He moved quickly, opening a drawer and pulling out a handgun. The sight of it froze her. "You have a gun?" "I've had enemies longer than I've had peace," he muttered. "Get behind me!" The wind howled louder as the door rattled under a sudden violent knock. Clara flinched. "Damien, don't open it!" He motioned for silence and edged closer. The knock came again, this time harder. Then a voice, calm but chilling. "You can't hide forever, Damien." The blood drained from his face. He knew that voice. "Who is it?" Clara asked, whispering. He didn't answer. He was already moving, locking the second latch and pulling her toward the back door. "We're leaving," he said. "Now!" Rain lashed against them as they ran through the woods. Lightning lit up the night, and for a split second Clara saw a man in a dark coat standing by the cabin door, holding something metallic that gleamed under the flash. They reached the car, but before Damien could unlock it, the sound of tires screeching came from behind them. Headlights flared through the rain, blinding them. Clara screamed as a black SUV stopped inches away. Two men stepped out, dressed in suits soaked from the storm. One of them spoke, his tone polite but dangerous. "Mrs. Voss would like to have a word." Damien positioned himself in front of Clara. "Tell my mother she'll have to wait." The man smiled faintly. "She doesn't wait. She decides." Another step forward, and Damien drew the gun, pointing it straight at them. "I said leave." The men froze, eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't shoot." "Try me," Damien said. The tension was electric, the rain hissing like static around them. Then slowly, the men backed off, retreating to the SUV. Before leaving, one turned back with a smirk. "You can't hide her forever, Damien. She always wins." The vehicle disappeared into the storm, and silence swallowed the forest again. Damien's hand trembled slightly as he lowered the gun. Clara touched his arm, her voice shaking. "What do they want from me?" He turned to her, his expression dark. "You're not the one they want, Clara. They want to remind me who's in control." Her eyes filled with fear. "What happens now?" He looked toward the distant lights of the city, his voice low. "Now we stop running. I'm done letting her decide who I love." Lightning flashed again, lighting his face like a vow carved in fire. Clara knew that whatever war had just begun would change everything. She wasn't just a mistake that walked into the wrong house anymore. She was the reason a man like Damien Voss was finally willing to burn his empire to the ground for something real. The night bled into morning without rest. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, like the world was holding its breath. Damien stood by the window of the cabin, his shirt half unbuttoned, the gun still lying on the table beside him. His eyes were fixed on the lake outside, but his mind was miles away. Clara watched him from across the room, her body wrapped in a blanket, her heart still pounding from the chaos of the night before. He looked calm, but she knew better. Every line of his body was tense, every breath measured. The man she had thought untouchable was cracking, and for the first time she saw fear in him. Not fear for himself, but for her. Who were those men? She asked finally, her voice low, almost afraid to disturb the fragile stillness. Damien didn't turn. "My mother's shadows," he said. "She sends them when she wants to remind me that nothing belongs to me. Not my company, not my future, not even my life." Clara tightened the blanket around herself. "Why would she do this? You're her son." He laughed softly, bitterly. "To her, I'm not a son. I'm an heir, a tool, a name to keep her power alive." He looked at her then, his eyes dark, stormy. "When she sees you, she sees weakness. She'll do anything to break it." Clara stood, anger and fear twisting inside her. "You can't live like this, Damien. You can't let her control everything." He walked toward her, closing the space between them. "You think I haven't tried to stop her? She owns every share, every connection, every person who owes me their loyalty. The Empire may have my name, but the power still has hers." Clara's eyes softened. "Then what do we do?" He took her hand, his voice dropping to a vow. "We take it back." Before she could answer, a sharp beep cut through the silence. Damien's phone. He checked the screen and his jaw clenched. A single message glowed across the display. "You can't protect her forever." Attached was a photo. Clara's apartment, her front door smashed open, her knees went weak. "Oh my God. Isabel!" Damien grabbed his keys. "Get in the car!" They raced back toward the city, every mile filled with the weight of dread. When they reached the building, the scene made Clara's blood run cold. The door to her apartment was splintered, the lights still flickering. Inside, furniture lay overturned, and papers were scattered like fallen leaves. Isabel was gone. Clara's scream echoed through the hall. Damien caught her before she collapsed. "She's alive," he said, though his voice trembled. "They wouldn't hurt her, not yet. She's bait." Tears blurred Clara's vision. "Why are they doing this? What do they want from me?" "They want me to choose," he said darkly. "To walk away from you or lose everything I love." She looked at him, terrified. "And what are you going to do?" His answer was quiet but deadly. "I'm going to end this." That night the city glittered like broken glass. Damien met his lawyer in a secret location, a rooftop bar that overlooked the skyline. "I want every account under her name frozen," he ordered. "Transfer control to me by morning. Damien, she's your mother," the lawyer warned. "You'll start a war." He smiled coldly. "It already started." Meanwhile, Clara sat alone in the car, parked on the street below, the weight of everything crushing her. She clutched her phone, replaying every memory of Isabel. The laughter, the endless encouragement, the friend who had told her to take one last chance on life. The thought that she might be suffering because of her made Clara's chest ache with guilt. The phone rang suddenly. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice came through, calm, icy, controlled. "Clara Reyes, I've heard so much about you." Clara froze. "Who is this?" "You already know," the voice replied. "You walked into my son's life uninvited, and now you'll walk out of it the same way." Clara's throat tightened. "Where's Isabel?" "She's safe for now, but you'll decide how long that lasts. What do you want from me?" "Simple," Victoria Voss said softly. "Disappear. Leave Damien, leave the city, leave the story you don't belong in. If you do that, your friend goes home unharmed. If not, well, I'm sure you can imagine the alternative." The call ended before Clara could respond. Her hands trembled as she lowered the phone. A single tear slid down her cheek, then another, until she could barely see the road through her tears. When Damien returned to the car, he knew instantly that something had changed. "What happened?" he demanded. Clara couldn't meet his eyes. "She called me." He went still. "What did she say?" Clara's voice broke. "She has Isabel. She said if I don't leave you, she'll—" He slammed his hand against the dashboard, the sound echoing like thunder. "No, she doesn't get to win again." Clara turned toward him, her face pale, her voice shaking. "Damien, listen to me. She's your mother. You can fight her, but she'll always be one step ahead. If staying with you puts Isabel's life in danger, I can't—" He gripped her chin gently, forcing her to look at him. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. You're not walking away from me." Tears streamed down her face. "I have to." For the first time, his voice cracked. "Clara, please." The city lights blurred as she reached for the door handle. "You once told me I walked into your life by mistake," she whispered. "Maybe now I have to walk out of it to save it." She opened the door and stepped into the night rain, leaving him frozen behind the wheel. Damien watched her disappear down the empty street, her silhouette swallowed by darkness. His heart felt like it was being carved out of his chest, but far above, in a penthouse filled with glass and shadows, Victoria Voss poured herself a glass of wine, smiling faintly at the storm outside. "She'll be gone by morning," she whispered, "and my son will finally remember where he belongs." What she didn't know was that her son had already decided that belonging meant nothing without the woman who made him feel alive. And as the storm began again, Damien vowed that this time he would fight not just for power, but for love, no matter who he had to destroy to keep it. The morning after Clara disappeared, the city felt heavier than ever. Damien hadn't slept. He sat in the back seat of his car outside the Voss Tower, his eyes burning red from exhaustion and fury. The sky above was bruised grey, thick with clouds, as if the world itself was holding back another storm. Thomas, his assistant, stood outside the car door, uneasy. "Sir, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Damien's voice was cold. "Cancel it. Sir, your mother—" "I said cancel it," he repeated, stepping out of the car, his suit dark, his expression darker. "There's something more important than business today." He walked into the building, the guards stiffening when they saw him. Everyone knew the tension between him and Victoria had gone from whispers to open war. But no one dared intervene. The elevator doors closed behind him, and the city disappeared. As the floor numbers climbed, his heart hardened. When he reached the top floor, Victoria Voss was already waiting, seated in her glass office like a queen on her throne. She didn't look surprised to see him. She never did. "Good morning, Damien," she said smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd remember who you work for." He didn't sit. "Where is she?" Victoria smiled faintly, sipping her tea. "Which she, do you mean?" "You tend to collect them. You know exactly who I mean," he said, his voice sharp as glass. "Clara Reyes, where is she?" Her expression didn't change. "I warned you, Damien. That girl doesn't belong in our world. She's reckless, emotional, and foolish enough to believe love changes anything. It doesn't. Power does. Don't talk about her," he said, his tone low but trembling with control. "You think power keeps you safe, but all it's done is make you a prisoner in your own empire." Victoria stood, calm and composed. "You sound just like your father before he ruined himself. You've always been too sentimental." Something inside him snapped. He didn't ruin himself. "You did," her eyes flashed. "Careful, Damien." He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You can threaten me, manipulate my company, my reputation, but if you've touched Clara or Isabel, I swear I will burn everything you built to the ground." For the first time, Victoria's smile faded. "You wouldn't dare." He leaned in, his voice a whisper of steel. "Try me." He turned and walked out before she could respond, leaving her in stunned silence. Outside the building, the air hit him like a slap. He needed to find Clara, but she had vanished. No calls, no messages, no trace. He had searched every contact, every lead, but it was as if she had been erased. Then, as he drove through the outskirts of the city, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered instantly. "Damien Voss," a deep male voice said. "If you want to see her again, come alone, midnight, Pier 9. The line went dead. He knew it wasn't his mother's voice. This was something else, something darker. That night, rain returned to the city, relentless and cold. The docks were empty, except for the hum of the wind and the smell of salt and iron. Damien's car stopped under a flickering streetlight. He stepped out, his coat whipping in the wind, his hand inside his jacket where the gun rested. Then he saw her, Clara. Standing under the pier, drenched and shivering, her wrists bound loosely with rope. Relief and terror collided in his chest. "Clara!" he shouted, running toward her. She looked up, her eyes wide with warning. "Damien, it's a trap!" Before he could reach her, a figure emerged from the shadows behind her. The man was tall, his face half hidden under a hood. "So this is the great Damien Voss," he said mockingly. "The man who thinks he's untouchable." Damien's voice was deadly calm. "Let her go," the man laughed. "Your mother sends her regards." Damien's pulse roared in his ears. "You're making a mistake." "No," the man said. "You did the moment you chose her over blood." He pulled a knife, holding it to Clara's throat. She gasped, trembling. Damien took a slow step forward, his hand steady on the gun. "You don't want to do that." "Then prove it," the man sneered. "Drop the gun." Damien hesitated. One wrong move, one breath too fast, and she'd die. He dropped the weapon slowly, letting it clatter against the wet concrete. The man smirked, loosening his grip just slightly, and that was all Damien needed. He lunged forward, slamming into him, the knife scraping across Damien's arm as both men crashed to the ground. The gun slid away, spinning into the dark water. Clara screamed his name as they struggled, fists and blood and rain mixing into chaos. The man swung again, but Damien caught his wrist, twisting it until a crack filled the air. The knife dropped. Damien shoved him hard, sending him stumbling toward the edge of the pier. One last punch, and the man fell backward, disappearing into the black waves below. Clara fell to her knees, crying as Damien untied her. His arm was bleeding, but he didn't care. He pulled her close, holding her as if letting go meant losing her forever. "It's over," she whispered. He looked toward the dark water. "No, it's just beginning." Later that night, as they drove away from the docks, Clara pressed a trembling hand to his wound. "We have to leave the city, Damien." "She'll never stop." He shook his head. "I'm not running anymore. What are you going to do?" she asked softly. He looked ahead, his eyes reflecting the passing lights like shards of steel. "I'm going to take back everything she stole. And when this is over, I'll make sure no one ever uses love as a weapon again." Clara reached for his hand. "Then I'll fight with you." He looked at her for a long moment, the storm outside mirrored in his gaze. "You might regret saying that. I already don't," she whispered, and as the city skyline disappeared behind them, one truth became clear. This wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a war between blood and choice. And neither of them knew who would survive it. The night after the fight at the pier felt endless. Damien's wound burned, but he didn't flinch. The pain kept him awake, reminding him that he was still alive, that Clara was still breathing beside him. They had driven for hours until the city lights disappeared in the rearview mirror, replaced by the long, empty stretch of countryside. Clara sat silent in the passenger seat, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling every time thunder rolled in the distance. When they finally stopped, it was at a remote vineyard Damien owned, under a false company name. It was quiet, surrounded by miles of fog and wet earth. The kind of place where no one could find them, at least for now. Inside the small villa, the air smelled of dust and old wood. Damien dropped his coat, the dark stain of blood spreading through his sleeve. Clara moved quickly to his side. "You're bleeding again," she whispered. "It's nothing," he muttered, but when she pressed her hand against his arm, he winced. She glared at him through her tears. "You nearly died for me, and you think it's nothing." He looked at her, exhaustion softening the steel in his eyes. "I'd do it again." She wrapped the wound carefully, her fingers trembling as she touched his skin. Every heartbeat between them felt louder, heavier, charged with all the things they couldn't say. When she finished, she sat across from him, her voice low. "What happens now?" Damien leaned back in the chair, staring into the fire. "Now I destroy the one person who thinks she can control my life." Clara's voice broke. "You're talking about your mother." He nodded slowly. "She took everything, my father's legacy, my company, my freedom. Now she's trying to take you. But this time, I'm going to make her feel what it's like to lose." Clara shook her head, tears falling again. If you fight her, you'll lose everything. He looked at her with a fire that made her heart tremble. If I don't fight her, I'll lose you. Before she could respond, the phone on the table buzzed. A single message flashed on the screen. You can't run forever, Damien. The world is watching. He stared at it, jaw tightening. Then another message followed, this time a video link. He opened it and Clara gasped. The footage showed the two of them at the pier. Every moment, the fight, the fall, the blood had been recorded. It wasn't just surveillance. It was evidence. Clara covered her mouth. She recorded everything. She's going to destroy you. Damien's voice was quiet, deadly. No, she's going to try. He stood abruptly, his phone still glowing in his hand. She's setting me up for murder. That man at the pier, he wasn't just a messenger. He worked for her, and she made sure the world would see me as a killer. Clara's knees went weak. Then what do we do? He turned toward her, the light of the fire flickering against the determination in his eyes. We find proof. Something that ties her to everything she's done. How? He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Because my mother has one weakness. She doesn't destroy evidence. She collects it. Hours later, under the cover of fog, they returned to the city. The plan was reckless, dangerous, and nearly impossible, but it was all they had. Damien's mother's private archive was hidden beneath her estate, a vault of contracts, letters, and recordings, protected by biometric locks and guards. It was the heart of her power, and he was going to rip it out. Clara followed close behind him as they moved through the shadows. The back entrance opened with his old keycard. "Stay close," he whispered. "If anything happens, run." The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of security lights. Every sound felt magnified, the click of his shoes, the shallow rhythm of her breathing. They reached the door to the vault, sealed by a scanner that glowed blue. Damien pressed his thumb to it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the light turned green and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the room was colder. Metallic shelves lined the walls, filled with files and digital drives. Clara stepped forward, her eyes wide. "What is all this?" "Every secret she's ever buried," Damien said quietly, "including mine." He scanned through the folders until he found one marked with his father's name. He opened it and froze. Inside was a document that made the blood drain from his face. "She lied," he whispered. Clara moved closer. "About what?" He handed her the paper. It was a will. His father's real will, rewritten and hidden. The company had been meant for Damien, not Victoria. She had forged every signature, every document, to steal his inheritance and his father's empire. Before Clara could react, the lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Damien pulled her close, his voice low. "She knows we're here." Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, slow, deliberate, then a familiar voice cut through the dark. "I expected better from you, Damien." The door slid open, light spilling in, and there she was, Victoria Voss, dressed in black, her expression calm, but her eyes burning with triumph. Behind her stood two armed men. "You've gone too far this time," she said, her voice like velvet over glass. "Stealing from your own mother? How tragic!" Damien stepped forward, fury radiating from him. "You forged father's will. You built your empire on lies," Victoria smiled coldly. "And yet the world believes me. Who do you think they'll believe now? The respected woman who built Voss Industries, or the unstable son who's already wanted for murder?" Clara's heart dropped. Damien moved in front of her, shielding her from the guards. "You won't win this time," he said. "I already have," she whispered. "You just don't know it yet." Suddenly, one of the guards fired a shot. The sound exploded in the room. Clara screamed as Damien pulled her down behind a metal shelf. Bullets shattered glass around them. "Run!" he shouted, but Clara didn't move. She grabbed the flash drive from the desk, the one containing the forged will, and clutched it tightly before crawling toward the exit. Another shot rang out, grazing Damien's shoulder. He grunted in pain, but stayed on his feet, firing back until the guards retreated. When the smoke cleared, Victoria was gone. Damien staggered toward Clara, who was shaking, clutching the flash drive. "You got it?" She nodded, her voice trembling. "I got it." He smiled faintly through the blood on his lips. "Then it's over. but as they turned to leave, a faint red light began flashing above the door. Clara froze. "What's that?" Damien's expression darkened. "Security lockdown. She's trapping us inside." The metal doors slammed shut, sealing them in. Outside, Victoria watched the monitors from her office, her reflection merging with the security footage. She lifted her glass of wine and whispered to herself, "Let's see how far love can save you now, my son." Inside the vault, Damien wrapped his arm around Clara as the alarm echoed through the room. The fire from the gunshots had started to spread, smoke rising fast. Clara's voice broke through the chaos. "Damien, we're trapped." He looked at her, his face streaked with ash and blood, his voice steady even in the flames. "Then we fight our way out, together." And as the fire swallowed the room, they held on to each other. Surrounded by the ruins of everything his mother had built, proof that even in destruction, love still refused to die. Smoke thickened in the vault, filling the air with the metallic scent of fire and gunpowder. Clara's lungs burned, her eyes stung, but she refused to let go of Damien's hand. He dragged her toward the emergency exit panel, kicking through falling debris while alarms screamed around them. The fire ate through the steel cabinets, each spark lighting the ghosts of Victoria's empire. "Hold on to me," Damien said, his voice hoarse. His shoulder bled again, the fabric of his suit soaked dark. "There's a maintenance shaft behind this wall." "How do you know?" Clara coughed, covering her mouth. He smirked through the smoke. "Because I built this place. And I never trusted her." He slammed his palm against a hidden sensor. With a hiss, a narrow door opened, leading to a dark passage that smelled of dust and secrets. They stumbled through it, the sound of the vault collapsing behind them. Clara turned once, just in time to see the flames consume the last of the files. Everything Victoria had built was turning to ash. When they emerged into the cold night, Damien fell to his knees, coughing blood. Clara knelt beside him, shaking. "You need a doctor," he shook his head, gripping her wrist. "No hospitals. She'll find us. We need to disappear." "Disappear where?" He looked up, the reflection of fire still flickering in his eyes. "Where she can't reach us, where her money means nothing." 3 days passed. They hid in an abandoned lighthouse by the coast, its glass shattered, its beacon long dead. The ocean roared endlessly below, washing away everything except their silence. Damien's wound healed slowly, and every night Clara sat beside him, watching the tide pull at the rocks. "Why didn't you tell me how deep this went?" she asked one evening, her voice soft. "Because I thought I could protect you from it," he said. "I was wrong." She reached out, brushing her fingers across his jaw. "You can't save me from loving you, Damien." He caught her hand, kissed her palm, and whispered, "And I can't save myself from you." But their peace didn't last. One morning, Clara woke to find him gone. His phone was left behind, and on the cracked screen was a message that made her blood run cold. "I'm ending this." She grabbed her coat and ran into the storm, her heart pounding like the surf below the cliffs. The roads blurred as she drove back toward the city, her mind screaming his name. When she reached the Voss Tower, it was surrounded by police cars. Flashing lights reflected off the glass facade like shards of lightning. A detective stopped her at the entrance. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." "My name is Clara Reyes," she gasped. "Damien Voss, where is he?" The detective hesitated. "Top floor." "But you don't want to see this." She ran past him before he could stop her, her heels echoing through the empty lobby. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse, where everything was too quiet. Papers were scattered across the floor. The smell of smoke still lingered from the night of the fire, and at the far end of the room, Victoria Voss stood near the window, holding a glass of wine, her reflection blending with the storm outside. "Clara," she said calmly, as if greeting a guest. "You really are persistent. Where is he?" Clara demanded, her voice breaking. Victoria turned slightly, revealing Damien standing a few steps away, pale and tense, a gun in his hand. His eyes were cold, unreadable. "Damien," Clara whispered, moving closer. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on his mother. "She has to pay," he said finally. Victoria laughed quietly. "You think killing me will fix anything? You'll become exactly what I said you were, a monster." I already am, he said. Clara moved between them, her tears mixing with the rain blowing through the open window. No, you're not. You're not her, Damien. He looked at her, and for a heartbeat she saw the man who had saved her life. The man who had kissed her like the world could end at any moment. Victoria's voice sliced through the silence. You'll never be free of me, my son. Even if I die, the world will still belong to my name. Damien's hand trembled. The gun lowered slightly. Then I'll make sure that name dies with you. Damien, please, Clara whispered. Don't let her take what's left of you. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly Damien dropped the gun. It hit the marble floor with a metallic echo. You win, Mother, he said quietly. But you'll live long enough to watch everything you built crumble. Victoria's smile faltered. What are you talking about? He stepped closer, his voice calm, almost gentle. Before the vault burned, I sent copies of the files to the press. Every forged signature, every lie, every illegal deal, it's already out there. Her face drained of color. You didn't. Oh, I did. The first sirens began to wail in the distance. Helicopters circled overhead. Reporters shouted outside the tower. The empire of Victoria Voss was falling in real time, exposed to the world she once controlled. She stared at her son, disbelief breaking into rage. You destroyed everything. No, he said softly. I freed it. Victoria lunged forward, her hand striking his face, but he didn't move. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall as federal agents burst through the door. As they pulled Victoria away, she screamed his name. You'll regret this, Damien. You'll regret ever crossing me. He stood silently, watching her disappear into the chaos she created. Clara reached him slowly, her trembling hands cupping his face. It's over. He shook his head, eyes distant. No, it's just finally real. She kissed him, her lips salty with tears and rain. Then let's start over. No lies, no blood. Just us. He smiled faintly, the stormlight soft against his bruised face. You still believe in us after everything? I walked into the wrong house once, she whispered. And I found the right man. Weeks later, the news filled with headlines of Victoria Voss's empire collapsing, her assets frozen, her name dragged through every courtroom in the country. Damien disappeared from the public eye. Some said he fled to Europe, others whispered he'd vanished into the shadows for good. But on the quiet coast, far from the noise of the city, Clara stood by the ocean at dusk. The lighthouse had been rebuilt, its beam glowing once more across the water. Behind her, strong arms wrapped around her waist. Damien's voice brushed her ear. You found me again, she smiled, leaning back against him. I never stopped looking. He kissed her hair, his voice soft against the wind. Do you think the world will ever forgive us? She turned in his arms, meeting his grey eyes. The world doesn't have to. We already forgave each other. The sea roared, endless and alive. Above them, the light swept across the waves, marking the path home. In the end, love hadn't come from perfection. It had risen from ashes, from pain, from everything they survived together. And as the night closed around them, Damien and Clara stood hand in hand, the storm behind them, the light ahead, proof that even in the darkest stories, love could still find its way back.